Wandile, thanks for your time as always. So you have, gone ahead of the government, so to speak. I mean, they haven't told us exactly how they are going to expropriate land without compensation in great detail. You've done some research as to how they could, outlining 4 scenarios. Let's start with the first, the self-help scenario. Take us through that.
No, I mean, if you feel, yeah, like you rightly said, there's not much information on what exactly is going to happen except the statement that has been said. So, in drafting this scenario, we really considered obviously the public opinion that is there, and also weighing more on looking at the legal as well as the economic implication of whatever policy trajectory that is taken. And on a self-help, there's really there is an understanding or general sentiment in South Africa that people want land. There is some land hunger in some corners of South Africa. So on a self-help scenario, we're really thinking that, okay, that would be a situation where people will really behave irrationally and rush for land, and there will be those situations where there will be land invasions. But we really place a small probability for such scenario to be actually happening, because we believe that there is some bit of enough land in some pockets in South Africa, and we think that South Africans also do obey the rule of law, and I think that there's a really less scenario possibility of that happening.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we stand by the rule of law
And
as
then now, Fifi, when you drift from there, the second. As South African, we stand by the rule of law, and then that's the first scenario that we actually envisage, and we allocate a small probability there. And when you move from that scenario, we also have another one, which is really a gradual decline scenario. There, it's a really 2 ways. That's really if it assumes that if the constitution could be changed to really allow for expropriation to happen. So that will be done along the legal framework, but the economic implication there will be dire in the sense that it will pretty much undermine the property rights and everything. And I think that if you were to look at the current resolution more broadly, when people say change the constitution, one would think that would be the route that we're actually taking. But there's 2 big qualifying statements that the ANC themselves they put up. They say whatever they do, they want to make sure that it doesn't hurt the economy. It also there is sustainability on the agricultural sector. So that scenario too, we somewhat places relatively less probability of seeing that actually happen. And that would happen in a sense, obviously, if certain political parties would make sure that they join their voices together and they vote on changing the constitution, and we were to follow that situation. And I still, in our judgment, we don't think that that's a desired scenario to follow, similar to the self-help one. We don't think it's a desired one. And then you have other 2 scenarios where you have the economic sustainability, which is the business as usual, like the current policies that we're carrying out today. Economically, this has been good, as you know, the value of the agricultural sector, the performance and everything. But on a legal side, I would say that we are mixed, because those that are already on the other side of the fence, they enjoy the fortunes of this. But there are people which have led us to be in a situation that we are in, who feel that they are somewhat being excluded. And I think that in that sort of way, we will need to readjust a little bit, which is why we have a scenario which we call it a hybrid scenario, which will take into effect of this. And there might be some possibilities of expropriation if you move to the hybrid, but that expropriation could only happen to certain portions of land that are really unused, and people would be compensated for reallocation costs and all of those things. So that's really what we're putting on the table.
So I take it that you're wanting the hybrid approach as being the best for the economy economically, and also the best to avoid any legal implications. You're talking about expropriating certain bits of land there. Which land would this be?
No, I mean, look, in that scenario, obviously, we're putting all of this for discussion, not really recommending any of that. But under the hybrid side, we assume that lands that, for example, you buy land and you work at CNBC Africa, you leave that land somewhere in Natal where there's really nothing that is actually happening. Those are some of the pieces of land we can say Fifi is working for CNBC. It's not farming, it's there. Maybe we can think of the ways of taking that land and giving it to someone else. But obviously, there could be some sort of compensation that you have to get for that piece of land, even though it would be below market value and stuff. And that also would have to be tested within the legal side, because obviously we haven't explored on the practicalities of the current constitution or whether it can allocate with that. But we do know that it has a section which says that there could be expropriation if something is for the public good or the public need. So in such pieces of land, when there are people wanting to farm and you are sitting there, those are some of the pieces that we will look at. And obviously there is some piece of lands that are for recreational purposes, and there's nothing that is really happening. And if there's a need for that piece of land, or maybe there's a thinking that there could be some productive use that can happen other than just putting for recreational purposes. Those are some of the pieces of land that could be looked at. And that will have some winners and losers, because, I mean, yourself, for example, if your piece of land is expropriated, you would lose because maybe you purchased it at a fairly higher rate, at a market rate, but because you haven't been using it, and maybe what you will be offered back will be below that market price. So those are the losses that we foresee in that scenario. But because we assume that it will be a public private partnership approach where government and private sector will work together in carrying it out, and there will be clear communication, and I think that at least there could be some bit of prosperity, because the message will be clear on what is being done. You're not just going to be undermining anyone's property rights. We think that might work best. The current business as usual is working best economically, but there is that portion of people that feel marginalized, and I think that's something that we should be concerned about.